Ready to light that fire by doing the things that make you come alive? Welcome to Health Raisers, a podcast for wise women. I'm your host, Dr. Nadine. I left a soul-crushing medical career full of bad news and evolved into a joyful health integration coach, helping hundreds of women find their healthy. You're more than your dress size. Stop putting up with toxic relationships, swallowing your true emotions, and sacrificing your mental health. Stop using your body as a battlefield. You're always giving. You deserve to put yourself first, not just for your sake, but for those you love. Wise women, let's make ourselves a priority right now. It's time to raise some health together.
Hi there.
Robbie, hi.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. Today, I'm so excited to have my friend, Robbie Swale, back on Health Raisers. Robbie is an executive coach, author, and podcaster whose work focuses on supporting leaders in complex, multi-faceted roles. When he was on last time, we had such a great conversation about moving through creative resistance as an act of altruism, using small, consistent practices that actually work. Today, we're diving into his new book, Power to Choose, which is perfect since we're spending this whole year exploring healthy relationships here on Health Raisers. In this episode, we're going to start by tackling some ideas and end with examples of how to put those ideas into practice. Robbie, welcome.
Nadine, it's so nice to be back on the show. It's lovely to see your face. And yeah, around the time that I was last on the show, I was doing a lot of podcast interviews. And one of the reasons I reached out to see if you would be open to doing a second time round is that the last one sticks in my mind so much, the feeling of it, what it's like to be in your company, the care and curation you put into this show. So guests and listeners are very lucky to have you, including me right now.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm going to dive right in. Okay, this was a juicy read. So, choosing. Essentially the theme of the book, the power to choose. My first question is, what does it really mean to choose? Especially when a choice seems to challenge who we believe we are.
It feels to me in this moment like it is one of the great privileges and challenges of being a human, that we get to choose. And we get to choose in a different way, as I understand it. Now, I'm not a zoologist, so you'd have to, I wish me in another life. I was in Australia earlier this year, and I realized how much I wish I'd been a zoologist in some ways, because I love that stuff. But as I understand it, in the animal kingdom, on the rest of this planet, almost the rest of life as we know it, the kind of choices that humans are able to make are almost uniquely human. And so it's, in a way, in this moment, what I'm noticing, and this is what I love about being in conversation with you, engaging with your work, this is a new thought, it feels like choosing is a human's birthright. And it doesn't always feel like that. And we can have circumstances, stories, parts of our past and evolution, parts of our ancestors' past and evolution that leave us feeling like we have no choice. But if we slow down with the core idea in the book, really, which is that not only do we have a choice of in the outside world, which way we turn when we go out of our door is on some level a choice. And some ways, Nadine, when I'm doing some parts of my work, I refer to myself as a choice absolutist. So I choose to believe that we always have choice everywhere. And usually what we mean when we say we don't have choice is we don't have choices available that are palatable to us. So I choose to believe that we all have choice. And we can get into that a little more if you like, but the core idea of the book really is that we get to choose our internal experience as well, often far more than we think, than we're taught. So that whilst we may know really well that we can choose which way we go outside of the door, we can choose which way to commute to work, we can choose what to spend our life doing, it's harder to remember that we have internal choice. And in the book, I put this quote from Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who was in the Auschwitz camp, who said, I think in man's search for meaning, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And that is what the choice really means to me.
So I'm going to elaborate. I'm going to share a story with you. I don't know if we talked about it last time, but I know my audience has heard it. So forgive me if this is repetition, but it's very pertinent to what we're talking about. When I was having my personal crisis to leave medicine, the last day that I went in, next to last day that I went into work, my husband recognized that I was really in trouble. I was leaving the house and I was putting my hand on the doorknob to go into the garage when my husband stops me, spins me around and says, "Are you going to be okay?" And I said, "Yes, because I have no choice." But it was very much from a point of complete desperation and emptiness. It was, I have no choice. I have to do this. I don't want to, but I have to do this because I believe that this is the type of person that I am. I am a doctor. I am responsible. I have obligations. And in order to be okay with myself, I have to do this. I have to follow this script. Does that make sense?
It really does. And what a moment. I can kind of see it in my mind, so vivid.
It was bad.
And look, we might get to it, that in some ways there was a personal crisis at the start of this book and this journey for me as well. And I wonder if we, I think those moments in our lives, they're pivotal moments in all kinds of ways. And just to catch it in that moment, because you told that story so beautifully and then you elaborated it so beautifully, within the constraints of who you saw yourself to be, there was no choice. And this is one of the hardest times to see that there's choice, right? In a way, it's why we need crises sometimes, I think, to change. Because only a crisis can kind of break this sense of who we are, which suddenly, once it's a bit broken or cracked, or there's this little gap and chink of light through, we realize, there's more choice here than I think. And if I've got the story right, because about what you felt there was no choice about, in the end, it sounds like you did find that there was choice. Because in the end, you didn't keep going in, right? But it
was kicking and screaming, though. It was, the catalyst was a personal, devastating crisis of basically life or death. It was.
Yeah.
It was. Bringing you Health Raisers is possible because of these incredible sponsors. Feeling the need for a little pampering? Do you want an escape from the hustle and bustle of daily life? Mac Salon and Day Spa is your destination for relaxation and rejuvenation in Southwest Michigan. Get ready for a retreat in the woods. Mac offers comprehensive services tailored to your needs, including massage, facials, nails, waxing, and hair treatments, ensuring you feel refreshed and beautiful. Whether you're preparing for a special occasion or simply treating yourself, the experts at MAC are committed to helping you look and feel your best. Their commitment to wellness isn't just about beauty. It's about balance, confidence, and feeling amazing in your skin. Visit them today and discover why they're Southwest Michigan's premier choice for all your beauty needs. Looking for some time away from the chaos of everyday life? Step into the beauty of Fernwood Botanical Garden, where nature, peace, and renewal come together. Nestled along the scenic St. Joseph River Valley, in between Niles and Buchanan, Fernwood's 105 acres of lush gardens, quiet trails, and serene woodlands offer a sanctuary for replenishing your soul. Wander through vibrant landscapes, listen to the melodies of birds, and connect with nature at your own pace. Indoors, you'll find an inspiring art gallery, a lush fern conservatory, and a welcoming cafe, perfect for reflection and relaxation. At Fernwood, there's always something to discover, from engaging classes and special events to charming, verdant venues for your own gatherings. It's more than a destination, it's a feeling, a place to breathe, learn, and grow. Plan your visit today. Explore, discover, connect. In the mood for coffee, tea, yummy pastries, or cool swag? My friends at Infusco have got you covered. Infusco Coffee Roasters is a cozy neighborhood coffee joint in Sawyer and St. Joseph, Michigan. Infusco stands for a healthy community. They craft irresistible seasonal drinks, sourcing local artisans' products. The flavors shine from quality ingredients, and their beans are roasted on site. They do not hide behind tons of sugar. Every time I go, I'm greeted by my name with a smile. Bad service is just non-existent. It feels like stepping into a friend's living room. They keep it personal. Old school, eclectic coffee mugs on the wall, fun merch, including stickers designed by artists, t-shirts, and sweatshirts. It's the perfect place to get to know your neighbors and chat with tourists. You will always find people deep in conversation. Special events keep it fresh. Community, health, the heart of Sawyer. That's Infusco. I hope to meet you there.
Yeah, in the introduction to the book, I talk about an idea from one of my mentors, Robert Holden, and he says he thinks, in life, and he talks about it in the pace of the modern world means that it moves so fast that that we never pause, right? It's why I think like a show like this, or the coaching work, or a practice like yoga, which I know is important to you, like these are all so important because they are like kind of invitations to pause, to pause from the rush of life. And what Robert says is, if you don't take a voluntary stop often enough, if you don't volunteer to slow your life down by maybe doing a yoga practice, going on a retreat, hiring a coach, taking the breaks or the career breaks or the holidays that you need, if you don't take a voluntary stop often enough, life will give you an involuntary stop. He says something like that. And my experience with people with involuntary stops is, if they make it through them alive, then most people look back on it and they say things like, I wouldn't wish that on anyone else, but, and then after the but comes some story of how those times when we're forced to stop and look at things have created possibility in the period of life after that.
That's lovely. It leads me into my next question, and I guess we've sort of delved into it already, but how we extricate ourselves from the cycle of reacting versus responding as a result of long-held, deeply rooted beliefs. Yeah,
in a way, that's the crux of this book, in some ways, and the book is in a way the kind of crux of a decade of work with people, which is what I've been doing for the last 10 years, really, that coaching work that you talked about as you introduced me. And look, it's not just the beliefs we have, it's the evolutionary patterns that we have. It's who we are as humans and our physiology, which is, you mentioned in the introduction, I often think about the work that I do now being helping people deal with the complexity of the modern world. The reason that matters is because we evolved for much, much simpler times. And anyone, like I'm 40, and even I can remember a simpler workplace. So anyone who's any older than me, especially if you're 60 now and you were in the workplace, 20 years before me, when there were barely computers, let alone the internet, let alone smartphones in our pockets, it's undeniable. If you're any younger than me, it's hard to imagine life before this explosion of technology. But we have all these ways that we slip into patterns and we slip into reacting. And as far as I can tell, the crucial move is, can we see, if we take beliefs as an example, but it could also be an evolutionary process or like a physiological process that has evolved into humans for simpler times. If we have awareness of that process or that belief, we as soon as we have awareness of it, we have this little bit of space between us and it. And in that space, that's the space that Frankel's talking about, where we can choose our experience of it. Just this tiny bit. We just need this tiny bit of space. And often the crises that we're kind of just talking about, they create this big bit of space, right? It's like, whoa, life can't go on like this anymore.
Right.
Or if someone suffers an illness or has a serious illness in their family, it can be, now that I've seen how fragile life is, I have space from all these things that I've been doing that I thought were just how life was, but I'm not going to put up with that anymore. I'm going to choose to be different. So those big crises, they often create a big space. It's not fun. You would, like I say, you wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it creates this bigger space. But on a day-to-day basis, we can take these ideas, and in a field of developmental psychology that I'm really interested in, they call it slightly opaquely the subject-object move. And what this means is, until we notice the thing, we're subject to it. It's just happening to us. This belief, it's an unconscious belief, let's say, that people are a certain way, or certain people are a certain way, or this person I'm in my relationship with, my husband or wife, is a certain type of person. She's like this, he's like that. Or when I go to places like this, or when I try to do something like this is what happens. We have these beliefs. While they're unconscious, they're just happening to us. We're subject to them. If we can get that little bit of space between us and them, they become an object we can see. And when they're an object we can see, we're just that little bit more likely to be able to choose to respond differently to them. So that rather than running the same old program we've always run when we are in a networking event or under pressure or having to do a talk or in a conversation with our husband or wife or partner, rather than running the same old pattern or program that we've always run, we get this little bit of choice. And at first, what I've seen is it does feel like a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of choice. And it's still hard to take it. But as you separate yourself more and more from that, you become less and less subject to it. And we get to have this bigger choice. And then in the end, it's possible. I feel, and this is a little what we were talking about last time I was on the show with the 12-minute method and those practices, that in the end, if you practice a new way of being often enough, it can become as natural as the old one was. And then that's the hopeful part of the story, right? Because the tough part of the story is it's a part of human psychological development to have beliefs that we live by. You can't really get around that. You have to have them.
Yes.
And you almost certainly you form them as you're growing up. And then at some point, some of them get broken because you bump into the world and you can't believe that belief anymore. And that can be pretty painful, or it can be really freeing. But the hopeful part of the story is you can form some new ones.
So it's not that you need to become someone different or that you are betraying who you are in order to make changes. It's simply, what I'm hearing you say is separating yourself from the story or stories that you're telling yourself. You talk a lot about the higher self, and I want you to elaborate upon that for the audience, please, in the book. So how we recognize our evolution, how we recognize that we are not the stories that we are telling ourselves, and how do we become or approach, because you'll never attain something. It's perfectionism is a fallacy, but how do we honor getting closer to our higher selves, as you put it in the book?
Yeah. These are great questions, and maybe we start with the higher self. So, for me, this is depending on who you are and what your beliefs are. You can take that phrase as seriously as you like. Maybe it's just a great metaphor. I think of it as being. It has lots of meanings for me, but in this moment, what's coming up is it's useful to have some name for that part of us that we are on our best days, when we aren't reacting, when no matter how much the person that usually sets us going and frustrates us or gets into rows with us, there are days when no matter what they say or do, I stay calm and centered and loving and skillful and noble and wise. And that we need some. My hypothesis here is that if we help ourselves grow, then we will get to a place where we can have access to that more and more. And that's one of the things that helps us survive the complexity of the world, that we react less, we skillfully respond more. And essentially that by doing this work of creating these little moments of choice and then making slightly more conscious choices, maybe slightly more wise choices, maybe choices slightly more in alignment with who we are, we get to be that higher self that little bit more often. We get that little bit more access day by day. And look, I don't know, but I think you're right. I would guess, the people that we might think had the most access to their higher self in that metaphor. And I'm trying to think who would be the people that people would name. They'd name the Dalai Lama, right? He'd be somebody I think that people would say, he's still got an animal being there. It's like all that presence that somebody like that has is still contained in a human body. All of that stuff is still going on for him. My guess would be that people like that, they just, because this is kind of my experience moving to a more conscious level, although clearly a different level of consciousness to people, I would guess like that, is that it's still there. It's just that the skill at choosing to access the higher self is greater as time goes on. And in terms of, changing who we are, I think one of those, I can't remember who I first heard say this, but I remember somebody saying, can you notice one of your thoughts? Can you notice a thought you have? And if the answer is yes, the question becomes, what is noticing? What is noticing the thoughts? As soon as you can notice a thought that you have, it's clear that your thoughts are not you. And if your thoughts are not you, then your beliefs are not you. Because if you can notice a belief, then it's someone's noticing the belief and it's not the belief. And so then we get that little bit of separation. And my feeling is this idea from a philosopher called Ken Wilber. And my feeling is this is a good way to think about these changes that we go through. He talks about the way things develop is they transcend, go above, and go around what came before. So that rather than it being moving from one you to another you, it's more like a Russian doll. You just put a bigger you around the you that was there before. And you still have access to all of it. You can still remember it. If you learn a new skill, you can still, if you learn to drive way, way better, you can still go and drive in the old ways you used to if you want. But you probably won't when you get there. But in learning, transformation work, people are often worried, like, if I change, what about the me that was there before? And it's always important to say, it'll still be there. You'll just have more access to more of you.
So much to think about in what you just said.
Yeah, we're in the big stuff here, Nadine, I think.
Well, I like to swim in the deep end of the pool. So
same here.
Okay. There's so much that's coming up for me as you were talking. There's something about, especially from a woman's perspective, it's horrible to generalize, but at the same time, I do think there are sort of these universal feelings that we share. There's this sense of betraying the people around you if you choose to drop those stories that are no longer serving you, to take up more space, to become closer to the person that you really want to be deep down inside, but maybe you can't really access. It feels forbidden because of the constraints of letting people around you down.
Yeah. And look, we know, and listeners know that too much generalization can be harmful. But I think there is a particular challenge. I don't know enough about it to name why, but I think there is a particular challenge for women. One way to think about it is, as I understand it, there's these in psychology. They have one of the theories is that there are these 5 traits. They call it the big 5 that all humans have, and it's kind of a personal. You can do a kind of personality test on it, but it's really rooted in the research. And one of them is agreeableness versus disagreeableness. And again, generally speaking, men are more disagreeable than women on this particular trait. Obviously there are some very disagreeable women and some very agreeable men on that trait, measured as it is. But I think.
But you're talking about the bell curve, the center of the bell curve.
Exactly. In there, so we know that there are patterns like that, and I think so. One of the shifts that people go through, one of the ways, again, according to some psychological theories, and this is the same place that the subject-object move that I mentioned comes from. It's kind of the work of people like Robert Keegan and Jennifer Garvey-Berger and Suzanne Cook-Greuter, if people want to look them up. They would say one of the shifts that people go through, so one of the ways we develop a worldview, a way to make sense of the world, is by understanding from society around us, what does a good person do? Except usually we do that by understanding, okay, what does a good daughter do? What does a good son do? What does a good mother do? What does a good worker do? What does a good doctor do? What does a good coach do? In my case, we learn all these things. And the problem we have in the complexity of today's world is when it's impossible to do all those things at once. And I think this is a thing that shows up that is much harder on a woman in the 21st century than on a man in the 21st century. Obviously not always and not everywhere, but for example, I've seen it with my wife over the last 5 years. Her parents getting older. So what does a good daughter do in this case? But she's had children. So what does a good mother do in this case? She's a 21st century woman. So she's got a very successful career. It's like, what does a good 21st century woman do? Because you're supposed to have the career that you could have and let no man stand in your way. And everything is equal. And so you're able to do anything you want. And all of this layered on, let alone good husband, good friend, all these other things. And you just can't do it all. And at that point, the move that we go through is we have to start to define what does a good person do from the inside. So rather than defining it based on what does society say a good person is, or what is a good mother, or a good daughter, or a good worker, or a good wife, or a good husband, a good son, a good brother do, we have to think, okay, that doesn't work anymore, because what a good mother does, according to my definition, is exactly in opposition to what a good wife should be doing right now, and what a good daughter should be doing right now, and what a good worker should be doing right now. And so I'm going to have to choose, right? So we're back to choice. And this is why the values work that so many people do and is prevalent in training and development, in coaching and these kind of things, why it's so important, because in a way that's doing this work. It's like, what are the values that I'm going to choose to live by? But to do that, we give that example, I have to either choose to be a good son here, or a good husband, or a good father, or a good professional, good business person. Whichever thing I choose now, I'm letting somebody down. Like, it's funny, actually, this week, my 5-year-old, just now, about an hour ago, got a little award at her school. And neither of us could go, because we had to choose on our, and now, of course, let's catch that language. We could have gone. We obviously could have gone. I could have cancelled this, and the meeting I had before. My wife could have cancelled the meeting she had, but we had to check our values, really, in that moment. We have to let somebody down. I'm really hoping she doesn't really know that we've let her down, because she doesn't know that we could have come, and she won't mind. She's 5, but she might. But you have to choose sometimes to let people down, and that is the way of the world as it gets complex, and as life moves so fast that all these roles don't fit together in some neat way, like maybe they would have been in simpler times.
I'm going to put this idea out there because it's something that is one of those moments where someone tells you something and it just changes the game. My therapist told me that people pleasing is dishonest.
And what did she or he mean by that in that moment? Well, what meaning do you make of that?
You're assuming a lot about what the other people want, and you don't really know for sure.
Yeah.
And you're also not being truly yourself. You're not being yourself. So you are lying to yourself about even what it means to be responsible or obligated or good in this particular situation. You're not really being yourself.
Right. Yeah. As soon as you're compromising, I really can feel it now. As soon as I'm compromising who I am and what I believe to please somebody else, like you say, it's such a good observation, based on an assumption of what will please them, then there's a level of dishonesty straight away in that situation, isn't there? And the more aware I am that I'm doing it, the more dishonest it is. Yeah, how interesting. And yeah, of course, we make these assumptions about other people, don't we? And we, especially if everybody who's listening, or you and I, we slow down and we think, what would we of the people we really love, if they were doing that for us, what would we really want them to do? Right? Well, I would for sure want them to be honest so that we could work it out. Not to, and I'm sure, I'm not sure I can do it in the moment, but I'm sure I can think of examples of friends and, probably my wife and maybe even the children, or they're a little young to people please now. Thankfully, they'll get there soon, tragically. But yeah, I could think of times when you can kind of see that somebody's doing it. And afterwards you think, why did you do that? I didn't even want you to do that thing. But some pattern, again, and so one of the things I think about people pleasing, you got to remember is, like everything, it's useful for a while, up to a point, right? I.e., it's good to be able to please people because, especially in our evolution, that's what helps humans cooperate, work together. It's probably what helps any single human not get ostracized from the tribe and get in serious trouble. And it was serious trouble for most of the existence of modern humans to be the person in the group that no one liked, right? It's life and death, probably. So people pleasing, very useful up to a point, and then we get this time again when we have a way of being that is our only way of being, and it meets a part of the world where the complexity of the world where that doesn't work. That's where we run into trouble, and that's where we start to, hopefully, if we're lucky, get a bit separate from it. Wow, I had this pattern of people pleasing, and it's kind of dishonest. Well, okay, and then next time it happens, we're just that little. Now you've said this. Now I'm going to be thinking about it. You're probably going to be thinking about it. People listening will probably be thinking about it. The next time they've seen it, like we've got this separation, it's no longer only happening to us. And next time it's happening, we'll probably have that little bit more awareness, and then we get to go, oh, okay, that is how I've been. But what if I choose this time to just be 5% more honest? And that's usually when I'm doing client work. That's the kind of, if we've got a long held pattern or belief, that's what we're thinking. We're thinking, can we be 2, 3, 5% different here? Because the reason we hold these patterns for a long time often is because they feel like life and death to some part of us. And we don't want to assume that part of us is wrong.
That and also belonging, the need to belong.
Yeah. The need to belong can be big. Yeah. And we don't want to throw too big a stone into the pond, right? At once, we want to test it.
Okay, let's shift to the next idea because this one made me very uncomfortable. It still makes me uncomfortable.
Good. Yeah.
What if everyone is doing their best?
Yeah, I know. So annoying, isn't it?
It's tough. I still really don't believe everyone is doing their best, but if we do try to give, because I read the same books that you did, the books you reference about giving everyone an A, and what if they are doing their best? Yeah. What are your recommendations? Like how do we practice? It's a skill, first of all.
Yep.
How do we practice it? Are there any necessary ingredients to move past the resistance of that mindset?
Okay, yeah. So those books, if people want to dig into them, the Giving an A idea is from The Art of Possibility by Roz and Ben Zander. And What If This Person Is Just Doing Their Best? It originates in a book by Brene Brown called Rising Strong. And those are great books worth checking out. I reference them in this chapter because they capture this idea so well. So the idea generally is yeah. What if all your relationships will go better, and all your let's make this real. What if almost all your relationships will go better, and almost all your difficult conversations will go better, and almost all your interactions with strangers will be less stressful, involve more calm and more connection if you assume good intentions on the part of the other person. You assume that they are a good person just doing their best. So you can read loads more about that in the book, of course, or you can Google it and you'll find lots of people talking about these kinds of ideas. So here's the crucial thing for the skeptic and the person finding it really hard. First of all, it's what if, right? It's not saying everyone. And the reason I caught myself there is, if we get a little dark or clinical, these are the kinds of things that if you come across somebody who has, a serious personality disorder, this will not work, right? This kind of assumption is why Bernie Madoff gets to run that pyramid scheme in Wall Street for so long without anyone catching him, because everyone's assuming on some level, the only options are this is working, or he is a madman running a Ponzi scheme, ripping thousands of people off. Millions of people off, and to the tune of absurd amounts of money, right? You need a really suspicious person, and that's what happened in that story, as I understand it. A really suspicious investigator who assumed the worst of everyone all the time to find that and uncover it and make it happen. So we need those people, the really suspicious people. But the hypothesis is, for most of the interactions we have, life is a bit better if we choose to assume good intentions on the part of the other person. And there's a great story that Brené Brown tells about when she discovers, and she thinks it's a load of rubbish as well when she first discovers this in her sociology research. She asks her husband about it. He's a pediatrician. It turns out he believes this thing. And she says, but do you actually believe it's true? And he says, well, in the story, she says he thinks for 10 minutes. And I love this, because imagine that. It's like, wow, it's a big question. That's an interesting relationship where he just goes, I'm going to think about this, and goes off, and then he comes back. And what he says is so good. He says, I don't know if it's true, but what I know is when I believe that, it gets me out of judgment and helps me see the world more as it is and less as I want it to be. And so there's a heavy case for me why it's worth trying. But then let's do the real skeptics. In the book, I use this optical illusion. And if people have never seen this, you can Google like optical illusion, young woman, old woman. And many people have seen it when they're children. Basically, it's a black and white image. And at first, when you look at it, you will see it probably as either a young woman or an old woman. And if you're a kid and someone's showing you this for the first time and playing with you, you won't be able to believe that. They'll tell you there's also a picture of a young woman there if you've seen the old woman, and you won't possibly be able to believe it. And then in the end, someone will show you, oh, this is her nose. Or that bit that you were seeing as the old woman's nose is the curve of her neck. And suddenly you can see, instead of an old woman looking down towards the front, there's a young woman looking over her shoulder, right? And then from then on, whenever you're presented with that optical illusion, you can choose. You can do this weird thing where your focus changes slightly and your brain interprets the picture as an old woman or a young woman. Or you can kind of scrumple your focus a little bit and you just see some jumble. Because I think this is a great philosophical question, right? Is it a picture of a young woman? Or is it a picture of an old woman? Or is it a picture of both? Or is it actually not a picture of either? Because it's a weird optical illusion. And philosophically, I'm not sure what I think about that. And much more than we think, that's what life's like. That there are multiple ways to look at a situation. And it's the things we think are true are far fewer than we think. Mm-hmm. We assume lots of things are true, but there's a guy called Derek Sivers has a book called Useful, Not True. He says, like, the things that are actually true are things that a computer, a cat, and an alien from another planet would all agree it's definitely true. There is a table here, right? My computer is there. I am a human standing in a room. They'd probably all agree on that. But so much of what we think to be true is just an assumption. It's just a belief. It's all the stuff we've been talking about. So if you're a super skeptic, which is a fair response to what if everyone is doing their best, the thing to remember is you could just play with it a bit like the optical illusion. You could take a situation. I give an example in the book of a client of mine and his business partner in a small business that they were operating. And the client noticed that he was assuming bad intentions of his business partner all the time. He would get an email and he would even find himself like having a conversation with somebody else in the company about what an awful email it was and the business partner and this kind of thing. And then we had this conversation and we started to look the other way. And he got to then choose. He got to sit with the next email. Okay, what's it like if I stay with how I was thinking about my business partner? Okay, now I know that. Okay, what's it like if actually I look at this as though this is a good person who cares about me and cares about this business, doing the best he can maybe in difficult circumstances? How does the email read then? And what he finds, and what most of us find, is it feels completely different. And personally, the choice, so the subtitle of the book is Finding Calm and Connection. What I've found is, what if this person is just doing their best? What if everyone is doing their best? Is a shortcut to calm in many, many moments where I would otherwise have tension and frustration. Like the business partner, in my relationship, but also, when someone cuts in front of in the line at the coffee shop. It's like you get a choice. You can get really, if you're a British person especially, you can get like really internally angry without saying anything, right? And you can carry that with you the rest of your day. Or, and often, this would be an example. If I, especially one of the great things about writing a book is that you get to spend time with the ideas. And this book I've been working on and off for 9 years. So I've spent plenty of time with this idea. You get to go like, but that idea that I've been writing a lot about, maybe I'll try it here. And what happens is what if they just didn't notice? Or I used to live in London. They're a tourist. They don't know that the British are obsessed with queuing in the way that we are, and that it's a great social problem to a British person if you cut in the line. Maybe they just don't know that. And usually straight away, my whole energy shifts. But if it didn't shift, if it made things worse, I can just go, no, I can just shift back to this person is an inconsiderate idiot who's trying to get their coffee before me for some reason because they don't think I'm a good person, which is where I'm probably sitting before. And the second thing is, what I've noticed is I'm actually personally, I think with that idea, people often worry that that it's a kind of soft idea. That if you do that, you never challenge anyone. And actually, the coffee shop example being a good one, but we could do more serious ones. When I'm in that space, personally, I'm more likely to say, sorry, I think you might have accidentally cut in front of me. I've actually been waiting longer than you. And not only am I more likely to say it, but my experience is they're more likely to hear it than if I say, sorry, what do you think you're doing? Get out of the line. If we come from the frustration, it tends to bring people's hackles up with us, breaks the potential connection. If we come from curiosity and this assumption, it tends to lead to good outcomes. Let's say it again. There are exceptions. You may not want your lawyer to be thinking like this. If you've got, in certain very tough or destructive or toxic relationships, you may not want to make this assumption. But most of the time, for most of us, we're not dealing with people with big personality disorders. We're not dealing with genuinely malevolent actors. And it can be a powerful way to create more connection and calm.
Well, I do think it does. I do think it leads to more ability to distance yourself from being a reactive to a more of a responsive person if you make that assumption and if you come at it out of curiosity, which is the next thing I wanted to talk about. And you're taking good care of yourself in that situation too, and you can make a decision, I think, better as to do a decision about what to do next. Okay, so you say this is very well. I love this sentence. Curiosity is the antidote to contraction. Tell us about this powerful sentence. Elaborate what it's like to journey from victim to creator. So it's kind of what we've been talking about. We've been building up to this too.
Yeah. And the what if everyone is doing their best definitely helps us do this, right? One of the great things about that is it's a shift from certainty to curiosity. So it's a shift from this is how things are. And usually, because we evolved for simpler times, it's a slightly too simple story we tell us. Hero, person waiting calmly and patiently in the line at the coffee shop. Villain, person who cuts in, right? Very simple, black and white story.
Black and white, yeah.
And as soon as you get into what if this person is doing their best, we get, how could they be doing their, what if, could it? So we get this shift. So like much of my writing and work, and certainly this book, it stands on the shoulders of lots of giants. This idea, or an idea very similar to it, came from a guy called Guy Sengstock, who's a consultant and a coach, and founded a really powerful relational practice called circling. But the idea there is that we often, when we're feeling what we might call contraction, and this is the kind of feelings of tension that we get. It's us slipping into the reactive mode. People might say it's slipping into the kind of threat states, the fight, flight, freeze type responses that we have, either in full or this kind of on the, they're a good, either literally or as a good metaphor. We're just kind of in this kind of triggered state, tense state. We're more likely to snap. We're further away from that higher self. And when we're in that state, it's really hard to know what to do. How do you get yourself out of that? And what I kind of learned from Guy and then through experimenting was we kind of strain for it. A bit like, I've got much better at this, but when I first started meditating, I would be like straining for calm and peace and mindfulness. Oh, come on, think better. No, not think better, think less. Oh no, what am I doing? That kind of thing. And we need the opposite. And when you're in that contraction, that's a bit what it's like. You kind of, even if you've got awareness of how to get out, or awareness rather, even if you've got awareness that you want to get out, it can be hard to know what to actually do. And the feeling of the kind of openness that you want feels like a long way away. And what I learned from Guy is that a very powerful move is curiosity. And then later I learned from some of the, the leading thinkers in trauma work, in somatic theory, so how we relate to our bodies, is that, literally when we're in threat mode, if you were, I heard Peter Levine, who has this kind of amazing, so the book is, it's called something about a tiger. We'd have to look it up afterwards. If you look up Peter Levine on Amazon, you'll find this. He has these amazing stories about his incredible trauma work that he does. But the thing he does when people are really in, a full threat response, these kind of PTSD style responses, is can you get people to be this just tiny bit curious about perhaps the physical sensations in their body? And as you start to do that, and I wouldn't recommend anybody does this, right? If you've got somebody with you who's in that kind of state, they need a professional. And what we're talking about here is much smaller versions of that. But these little bits of curiosity, perhaps about physical sensation, begin to get people to slip out of their threat state. And once we're out of our threat state, we can see things much more clearly again. Somewhere it's kind of more analogous to the higher self when we're in this more socially engaged state. And so that move and that sentence, curiosity is the antidote to contraction, becomes one of the moves we have available to choose. It's not a bit like what if everyone is doing their best. It's not true in the kind of alien cat and computer would agree on it methodology, but it's useful. And what in the book, I guess I'm saying is those two beliefs, if you're going to choose some beliefs to help you grow and operate in the world, given its complexity, and reach your higher self more, these are two beliefs that are worth trying on for a while and seeing what the impact is. And that idea, curiosity is the antidote to contraction. It gets us this stuff we were talking about right at the start. It gets us this little space. So it's like, okay, wow, that conversation with that client that I had, I've been thinking about that for 24 hours now, and I'm still anxious and upset about it. What is going on? And in the book, I tell this story from which I love, from the consultant Fred Kaufman, who was in a small restaurant, and was having dinner, and then it became gradually more and more apparent, it's a small restaurant, that there's a couple on the other side of the restaurant having a tense conversation, until just as everything goes quiet, the woman says to the man, "It's not about the chicken, Harry. It's about the last 20 years." And we get this sense of that's what's happening for us all the time. Yeah, yes, I'm anxious about the client because of something that happened now, but also I'm anxious about the client because of probably something that happened to me before, or something that happened to humans a lot before. And sometimes we get that space, or we just get this deeper understanding of what matters to us. Oh, wow, I'm anxious about that because my business really matters to me. And I want it to succeed because I believe in this work. And right, that's why this gets to me so much. And then again, we get that little bit of space. We're not quite such a victim of the feeling. It's not just happening to us, and we get to choose that little bit more. And every time we choose, we're in creator mindset. You know, we are a creator of our life. And it can feel, when we feel like a victim, and especially when we've been a victim, because let's make that distinction. You know, we can feel like a victim, and we can have been a victim of crime, of all kinds of things. But we always get to choose in that way that Viktor Frankl says.
So we've tackled some big concepts: the power to choose, what if everyone is doing their best, curiosity is the antidote to contraction. Let's shift in our last few moments to practical examples, because you have worked with a lot of people in your coaching. You've talked to a lot of people, done a lot of reading, research for your book and prior books. Let's do two practical scenarios. So a fraught business relationship, and you can pick an example of something personal, say like for listeners who may be dealing with friend or family strained dynamics.
Yeah.
How can we put the power to choose into practice in two practical scenarios, real life examples?
Yeah. So the fraught business relationship, you know, we got a little bit of that with that client I was talking about before with his business partner. But you know, in that there's a move which is just let's try and examine the evidence as if the other person has good intentions here. And you know, we can then just see what happens. We can start to see, is that which one feels more true? And often you need three stories, right? Often we start with the story that we've already got, which is that the fraught business relationship is because the other person is a jerk, and that, you know, they're just someone who doesn't have any control over their emotions, or they have no people skills. That's the first story. And then we do a second story, and then we get the good thing about that is it breaks the first story a little bit. So it's like, what if this person is like the hero of the story? And they're certainly the hero of their story, right? No one, I don't think pretty much anyone gets up in the morning and thinks, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make everything worse for everybody, right? Like, so on some level, they are the hero of their story. And then you might need a third story that integrates the two, because usually somewhere in between. And if we're in conversation, there's a really nice video by Fred Kaufman of the chicken story that I mentioned a minute ago, where he gets this person up on stage to demonstrate what happens in conflict. And they put their hands up against each other, a little bit like you might if you were praying, except it's one person's hand up against the other. And he says, what happens? What's your natural response if I do this? And he pushes on her hand. And she can't help but just push him back, right? That's her human response. And that's what happens in all of these fraught relationships. What happens is I get a bit into my threat mode. I get a bit triggered. So I'm a little bit less skillful. So I push against the other person, and they naturally push back, right? And what we need in that situation is for somebody, and this requires courage, and it doesn't always work out, but the move to try is, what if you stop pushing? And that's what I think What If Everyone Is Doing Their Best helps us do. It helps us stop pushing. And Kaufman's demo, you know, he says, and most of the difficult conversations theory that I've read, you know, follows this as well. You know, the crucial move in difficult conversations really is to listen to the other person. Basically, there's this annoying fact that almost no one ever changes their mind based on rational argument. A much simpler way to help someone change their mind is to listen to them until they talk themselves out of the simple story they've got. So a powerful move for the fraught business relationship would be, let's have a meeting, and then we're going to set it up as what Kaufman would call a mutually beneficial conversation. So you set the start of the meeting is a purpose that is in both people's interests. So with a colleague, you can often do, I'd love to have a conversation about how we can succeed better together. And it's hard for anybody to not accept that meeting because it sounds like it would be worth it in everyone's interest. And then you have to either express your point of view first or listen to their point of view first. And when they listen, really listen And then once you've let them speak out everything they've got, and ideally paraphrase it back to them to really check you've understood it, it's likely that everything's softened between both of you. We're both more likely at that point to not be in our threat mode. And it's just likely that some of the tension and the fraughtness will fall out. So there's one example.
So have you seen this actually work in real time? Someone who feels like I can't take this job anymore. I'm not valued here. I have to leave. Everyone's a jerk. Have you actually seen a turnaround for a person who can put these ideas into practice and then stay and maybe thrive in that workplace?
So if the workplace has got to that far, like I don't know. It's not that you can never come back, but it's unlikely to just be about one fraught relationship in that case. But I have in fact, I caught up with a client yesterday, and when we were working together a few years ago, her situation was not that dissimilar to that. And we did some work on this exact framework ahead of a meeting with her manager, who she felt had been undermining her and didn't value her. And the outcome from it, and the reason I'm telling this story is because you asked for an example, and because it's the turnaround was exceptional. By the end of this meeting, this woman who my client thought really undervalued her and was trying to manage her out was talking about how much she respected my client and how much she wanted her to be part of the team. Now, the reason I caveated that beforehand is long-term, that client moved on to another organization and she's more happy. And so in the example you gave, the question would be, I might ask the client who was giving me that example, like, yes, we can tactically work on this conversation, but long-term, are you sure you want to be in this place? Mm-hmm. Why do you want to be in this place? Is there some underlying belief that's holding you here? Mm-hmm. But I've seen these conversations. A personal example is we live in the countryside now. We have our next door neighbor, and then there's a little stream. And like nearly 20 years ago, that stream flooded both these houses because the farmer who owns the land and is responsible for the stream hadn't cleared it. And my neighbor, it got pretty flooded last year or the year before, and my neighbor was really worried. She's carrying the stress of what it was like to have to, have the whole ground floor of our house underwater. And the farmer and her were at this like impasse. And at some point we met him for a walk here. And it was really interesting to watch how there was no mutually beneficial purpose for that meeting. And they just went at each other straight away, the neighbor and the farmer. They're already annoyed with each other. The farmer's annoyed because then my neighbor is hassling him all the time. She's annoyed because she doesn't understand why he doesn't just do his thing that he's supposed to do. And they're just pushing at each other. And then it was, again, the reason I'm telling this story is because it went well, right? And of course, there may be times when it doesn't work as well as this. But we did manage to just, get the conversation to a point where we were looking at trying to solve it together. And it turned out he was planning to sort the ditches in January anyway. And there was some subsidy thing going on. There was all these reasons why it made sense to him not to clear this stream. And once we got it out of the set to, the whole thing calmed. And in the end did get sorted. So again, it's a good story from that point of view. Mm-hmm. And let's then should we hold quickly the strained family relationship?
Absolutely.
So a strained family relationship, it's a little bit like my response to the business example that you gave, where, everything's tough for the person. A strained family relationship, that can be really entrenched. It can be long and old, and it can contain long and old stuff. And people listening will probably recognize this. I certainly do. You go home to your parents' house sometimes, even if it's not the house you grew up in, and suddenly your energy is different.
Yes.
I'm more like the child you were. Yeah. It's like, I'm a full-on grown-up. Why am I being like this? Like, what's going on? Why is it so hard to stand up to this person or to be like that with that person? So these are long and old patterns. And probably the move here would be first a solo move. So there would be two moves that we could make in that point. We can do the curiosity is the antidote to contraction on us. And that will often, so we can, what is really going on that is creating the strain from my side? So I can choose to take responsibility. It's not just them. And I would say it's a useful thing to choose to believe that in every relationship, it's at least a little bit both of us. Not 50-50, right? That's the kind of thing that I think sometimes people get wrong. We'd like assume that every relationship is equally both people's responsibility, or the strain in a relationship is both people's fault. No, but it's useful to believe that it's partly me. The reason it's useful to believe is then I can do something about it. Because if it's all them, that sounds good, but it's not, because there's no way I can affect it. Right? I can talk to them, but if it's all them, they may never listen, and then I'm stuck, right? So I want it to be at least partially me. And in a strained relationship, I would say the first place to go is that personal work. Can I get a little bit of space between me and the stuff that happens for me in that relationship through curiosity? Like, what's really going on here? What's it really about when me and that person have those run-ins that we have? Is it really about what's happening now, or is it about something else from like the last 20 years, like the poor wife of Harry in the story? And so that might be the first port of call. Another way to do it is we can check our assumptions about the other person. So what if this person has been doing their best the whole time? Or like the Ros Zander idea that you mentioned, what if I give this person an A? What if they're actually a grade A sister instead of a grade F- sister like I'm giving them? What happens then? How do I see things differently? Speaking of the Zanders, I remember in The Art of Possibility, Ros Zander tells this story about how she retold the story she had about her late father. So he died. They'd had a very difficult relationship. And she retold the story. She was like, what if he was a grade A father? Why would he have, I can't remember exactly what the story is, but why would he have behaved in the way that he did? And after she'd chosen to, and she did it, I think, in quite a lot of detail, she maybe wrote it out, she got it really separate to her, she started to find evidence for it. She found this lovely letter in a box that she didn't remember ever having from when she was a little girl, where he expressed things that she had completely blanked from her memory. And sometimes when we retell the story, there's more possibility there in the strained relationship than we think. And then, just to kind of to hold the reality of it, we also have to resource ourselves when we're going to do this. So, but this is true of the fraught relationships. It's true of the strained family relationships. Pick the battle when you are well resourced to do it. If we think about the Fred Kaufman idea, when we're pushing and pushing and pushing, as soon as one of us slips into that, let's say it again. When there's one of us that can stay as the higher self, the socially engaged person, not slip into threat state, not slip into fight mode, if you've got one of you in that state, then the conversation has a chance. As soon as both of you are in threat mode, the conversation has nowhere to go except the shoving match. And so a good thing to do is remember to resource ourselves. And Nadine, this is the stuff that you know way more about than me, and that this whole show is about, really, right? We have to look after our own health at that state. I mean, we have to not be hungry, not be thirsty. We have to have the good hormones running through our body. If we can do that, we're less likely to get hijacked by all the physiological processes, by all the past ideas that we might have.
And so sometimes this is something that I've been really thinking about lately, essentially the art of letting go.
Yeah.
When you do all of this work in a relationship that has been long-standing and you believed had to look a certain way and had to last forever, letting go of that story is a form of grief. It's a form of letting go, because sometimes we need to realize that nothing lasts forever, nothing is permanent, and sometimes we do have to let each other go lovingly. I think that's the difficult practice in this, right? Is you come at it from the power to choose. You recognize that the other person is doing their best. This is where they are in their journey. They may want to change it. They may not want to, but it's not your business to determine for that other person what they need to do. They need to do. But being curious allows you then to make the decision whether we go on or whether we let go lovingly, not with What tends to happen, I think, is especially not given this the zeitgeist, people are just falling out left and right. There's all this black and white thinking. It's like, oh, I'm going to stop talking to this person. And it's done out of anger and a lot of contraction and defensiveness. Whereas I think there's an art to letting go. You can let go. You can go through all these steps, try your best with the other person to determine what we both want in this relationship. And sometimes the answer is we can't continue to have one, but that's okay.
Yeah. It's beautifully put. There's a question I put in the book, which I call the honor question, which is, what would I have to do in this situation such that regardless of the outcome, I can feel at peace with myself? And relationships are perfect places that we cannot control the outcome. We can do everything right. And if somebody else isn't in that place to reach out in that loving way that you talked about, to find the ways to stretch themselves, to make the relationship work, we might have to let them go. We want to have done what we need to do so that we can feel at peace with ourselves about that. And then, like you say, we want to let go with love. And I've seen two types of letting go, both in my life and I think with clients. One type is where we let the relationship go. We don't speak to the person as much anymore, or we don't speak to them at all. And at that point, I think if we hold, what if this person is doing their best, which somewhere is in there is a loving question, then it's better for us. And it doesn't really matter about them because they're out of our life. What matters is, what is our feeling? Are we in contraction whenever we think about them, or can we let it go in that way? The other type of letting go I've seen is when we let go of the need to change the other person. So I saw this a lot over the UK, kind of 2016 to 2020, when we were having our Brexit political upheaval. There was lots of it's a little calmer right now. It's going to go crazy again next time we have a general election over here. So I think it's a little calmer right now in that kind of domain than it is over where you are. But it's going to come back, don't worry. And what happened in that period was, particularly, this was like personal work, right? At first, it was so tense. I needed everybody to change their mind. I needed people to be right. Well, I needed half the people to change their mind. I needed to be right. And what the piece of work that made all the difference to me was when I got to the place where I could just let the things wash by. So in this relationship, I could try and change somebody's mind, and we could have a deep conversation, and we could do all the stuff we've been talking about and really listen to each other, but we might not change each other's mind. But what I can do right away is I can stop rising to the conflict. I can let go of, in this place, the need to be, in this relationship, the need to be right. And people can have values judgments on whether that's okay and when it's okay and when it's not. But I do think that, letting go, getting a reasonable hand on what I as a single human can accomplish, and letting go of the things that are outside of that, that is a big move if we want more calm, and actually if we want more connection. Because we might decide that somebody's political views or whatever it might be are past a red line, and that we want the relationship to be out of our life. Or we might decide we still want some of that connection despite all that, and to stay in that relationship somehow. But we can only do that if we're not constantly in the state of contraction. And so I think, underneath it, that, you brought the word love in, which I'm really glad you did. And I think that's one of the principles, right? So if we think about what if everyone is doing their best, that's a love for others move. And if we think about curiosity as the antidote to contraction, that's a self-love move. And then neither of them are fun, but it's like, what's really here that's having this particular funny human animal that happened to be born, that's having me respond like this. And then when we get it, it's almost always like, right, it's like that other thing. That's one of the moves sometimes. It's like that other thing. And then when you remember that, the whole response makes more sense. And usually there's some love and compassion there.
Thank you so much, Robbie. I have had an amazing conversation with you. It's made me better. It started my day off well. It's left yet more imprint upon me to think and pause and to become more myself without any shame. Mm-hmm. So I thank you for that. And I ask you my last question. Has your definition of what it means to be healthy personally changed for you?
I wonder what I said last time. I can't remember. What comes up for me now when I think of healthy is, it's being real. It's being more real. And that doesn't always feel nice. I think that's kind of an important thing to say. If we do the curiosity move on ourselves, for example, or we have to let go of a kind of a belief that we had. I've been in quite a painful one, actually, like you were talking about, when we have to let go of those beliefs that we have. I had this my business had been on this upward curve pretty much since the start. And then last year was really tough. And it kind of broke this belief, and it was kind of painful to have the belief broken. That the belief being, if I just keep doing what I'm doing now, it's going to keep growing and growing forever. And of course, that's naive, right? But it still is quite painful to have that belief broken. But it is healthier to have the belief broken because the belief wasn't true. And I can put in now a more real belief about that. And so, healthy doesn't always feel, it's a bit like going to the gym, right? It doesn't always feel nice, but it is, we know after we've done it, or, been for a long run, done some endurance activity, it's not necessarily nice, but after we've done it, we know it was good. And so I think the curiosity digging that we've been talking about is like that, the breaking of beliefs, the creating worldviews that fit more closely with how many shades of gray are needed to look at the world. All of that, it's all a bit more real, and it feels good. And the realness goes a little further. Just getting this now, I hadn't thought it before. We in the modern day, if I spend too much time on my phone or too much time on Zoom calls, well, I've got to say, this has been an amazing Zoom call to end my day. And I've had some beautiful Zoom calls today. All 4 of my calls today have just filled me with energy. But if I spend too long on technology, too long on, these are things that are less real. And in the end, I can feel it. Like I noticed it with the AI tools as well, actually. I love engaging with them in some ways, but at the end if I'm doing it too much, at the end of it, I have this weird disruption to my energy. It doesn't feel good. Whereas if I look out the window here and there's this 180-year-old oak tree in our garden, I look at that, it's so real. And I know that every time I go near that tree or I do one of these things, I see the children, I go outside, I'm in connection with somebody, something real. And this is real because of the quality of this conversation, then that is really good for me. And that is health.
Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you so much. It's such a pleasure and privilege to have this conversation. And thank you for, as I said before, the curation you do on this show and in these conversations. I've thought new thoughts and connected to this book in new ways and very meaningful ways to me today. So yeah, thank you so much.
Wise women, move from last place to first place in your life. Stop using your body as a battlefield. Let's raise health together with a customized health plan just for you. Contact me at npkhealthintegration.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.